Today I am going to tell you 3 spooky ghost stories. Each of them is different. Are they real? I was assured that yes, but I leave the last word to you. I invite you to listen. Sweet nightmares. I'm a regular guy, an everyday Joe. I work a 9 to 5 at a downtown accounting firm. I live in a decent apartment. I have a cat named Mr. Whiskers. Nothing extraordinary about my life. Or so I thought until that fateful Tuesday. I had just gotten home from work, my briefcase in one hand, a takeout bag in the other. As I set my things down on the kitchen counter, I noticed something strange. The photo on the fridge, the one of me and my buddies at a baseball game, was missing. I figured it must have fallen behind the fridge or something. It happens, right? So I shrugged it off. The next day I woke up feeling uneasy. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. I was running late for work though, so I didn't have time to dwell on it. I grabbed my things and hurried out the door. When I came back that evening, I found my apartment in disarray. The cushions were off the couch, the books were thrown off the shelves, even the picture frames were knocked over. But nothing was stolen. Not the TV, not the laptop, not a single dollar from the stash I kept in a cookie jar. All that was missing were my photos. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold dread seeped into my veins. I dialed 911 and reported the incident. The cops came, asked some questions, took some notes, but there wasn't much they could do given the lack of physical evidence. Days turned into weeks, and the unease never left. My apartment was broken into multiple times. Each time, more personal items were taken. First my photos, then my clothes, my shoes, even my toothbrush. The police were clueless. They suggested I set up a surveillance system, so I did. I set up cameras in every corner of my apartment, hoping to catch the intruder. Every night I'd review the footage, straining my eyes for any signs of movement. But there was nothing, just an eerie silence and the unsettling feeling of being watched. One night, as I was scanning through the footage, I saw it. A shadow, barely visible, moving across the room. No physical form, just an amorphous blob of darkness. It moved with purpose, rifling through my things, taking what it wanted. I watched in horror as it disappeared with my belongings. I scrubbed through the footage again and again, my mind whirring. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. I considered showing the footage to the police, but what could they do? Haul in a shadow for questioning? I decided to confront it myself. I waited until nightfall, sitting in my living room, a baseball bat clutched in my hands. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow made my heart pound. I waited and waited, my anxiety building with every passing minute. It came at exactly 3:33 a.m. A chill swept through the room and the shadow appeared, moving with an eerie grace. I stood up, my grip on the bat tightening. I called out, demanding it to leave. The shadow paused as if considering my words. Then, it began to grow, stretching up the wall until it towered over me. I could feel its gaze, cold and calculating. In a sudden burst of courage, or maybe just desperation, I swung the bat. It passed right through the shadow, hitting the wall with a loud thud. The shadow recoiled, a low growl echoing through the room. Then it lunged at me. I barely had time to duck as it swiped at me, the coldness seeping into my bones. We fought, or rather, I fought. The shadow was relentless, shrugging off my blows as if that they were nothing. I was growing tired, my movements sluggish. The shadow seemed to sense my weakness and moved in for the kill. I swung the bat one last time, putting all my strength behind the blow. The shadow recoiled, a piercing screech filling the room. Then it vanished, leaving me alone in the dimly lit room. I was left standing there, heart pounding, sweat pouring down my face. I was victorious, but at what cost? I had fought off an entity that lived in the shadows, taking what it wanted without a care for the consequences. My life was forever changed. The normalcy I once took for granted was gone, but I survived. I'm still here, still standing. I'm no longer the everyday Joe. I'm the man who fought the shadow and lived to tell the tale, and I'll keep fighting for as long as it takes. After all, there's nothing ordinary about my life anymore. I was never one to believe in ghosts or the supernatural. That was until 3 weeks ago, when I moved into an old Victorian mansion in the heart of the city. It was grand, with high ceilings, ornate woodwork, and a history as rich as the city itself. It was perfect for an author seeking inspiration like me. Little did I know that this move would turn my life upside down. The first few days were uneventful as I busied myself with unpacking and setting up my new home. But then the incidents began. It started with the flickering lights. I'd be typing away on my laptop in the study when the lights would start dancing, like a Morse code from an unseen entity. I brushed it off as faulty wiring in an old house. A little later, I started hearing soft whispers echoing through the long, empty hallways. They were too faint to make out the words, but they sent chills down my body. I told myself it was just the wind, perhaps drafting through the old pipes and vents. Then things escalated. I woke up one night to find all the kitchen cabinets wide open, their contents strewn across the floor. The old grandfather clock in the hall started chiming at odd hours, and the antique mirror in the bathroom fogged up, even though there was no steam or humidity. I was rattled, sure, but being a man of logic, I tried finding rational explanations for these occurrences. Maybe the house was settling, or perhaps it was infested with mice. Things took a terrifying turn one stormy night. I was sipping on my whiskey, trying to make sense of the strange happenings when I heard the distinct sound of footsteps upstairs. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed a baseball bat and went to investigate. The sounds led me to a small room at the end of the corridor. An icy draft brushed past me as I opened the door to reveal an empty room. My heart throbbed heavily in the deafening silence. Suddenly, the air turned heavy, charged with a strange energy. My eyes were drawn to a dusty old portrait hanging on the wall. It depicted a stern man with piercing blue eyes. As I watched, the eyes seemed to glow, staring back at me. I felt an odd connection, a sense of familiarity that sent my mind spinning. I was rooted to the spot, my bat slipping from my sweaty grip. The room plunged into darkness as a loud crash echoed through the house. The hair on the back of my neck stood up and a sense of dread washed over me. I reached for the door handle, but it was jammed. I was trapped. My heart pounded in my ears as I stumbled back, crashing into the wall. The portrait's eyes bore into me, glowing in the dark. I could almost hear the whispers in my head, louder this time and laced with anger. I closed my eyes, praying for this nightmare to end. When I opened them, the room was bathed in a soft, ethereal glow. The portrait had transformed, the stern man now grinning menacingly at me. He lifted a hand, pointing directly at me. The whispers grew louder, forming a single sentence that echoed around the room. "You are not welcome here." With a burst of adrenaline, I threw myself against the door and it swung open, freeing me from the room's horrifying grip. I sprinted down the stairs and out of the mansion, not daring to look back. I spent the night in a nearby hotel, my mind reeling from the night's events. I was no longer a skeptic. The mansion was haunted, and the spirit was none other than the man in the portrait, perhaps a previous owner who wasn't ready to let go of his beloved home. I never returned to the mansion. The memories of that frightful night are still fresh in my mind, a chilling reminder of the unseen forces that may lurk in the corners of our world. I've learned my lesson. Some things are best left undisturbed, and some stories are better left untold. As for me, I'm back to being a wandering author, seeking inspiration in the mundane, away from the terrifying clutches of the supernatural. I may have lost a home, but I've gained a story that will haunt me forever. After all, who needs fiction when reality can be this terrifying? I was returning home from a late-night shift, the streets empty, and my thoughts occupied with the anticipation of a warm bed. The city slept around me, but there was a certain unease in the air, a subtle shift in the normality of things that I couldn't quite place. Little did I know, my life was about to take a sharp turn down an alley of the supernatural. There was a bar on my way home, a small nondescript place tucked away between two imposing buildings. I'd passed by it countless times, but that night something drew me in. There was a soft glow emanating from the cracked windows, a solitary figure hunched over the counter. Something about the man was out of place. He was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, complete with a bowler hat. His eyes were fixated on a glass of amber liquid, untouched. I took a seat beside him, the old wooden stool creaking under my weight. He didn't acknowledge my presence, his eyes still fixated on the glass. Then he spoke. His voice was a whisper, barely audible over the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. "Ever heard of a ghost, mate?" he asked, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were a striking blue, filled with a kind of melancholy that sent a shiver down my spine. Of course, I had heard of ghosts, but I'd never believed in them. I told him as much, expecting a laugh or a friendly scoff. Instead, he nodded, took a sip from his glass, and started talking about a tale so bizarre it would have been laughable if not for the seriousness in his eyes. He spoke of a ghost, a woman, who haunted the city streets at night. She wasn't malevolent, he said, but was lost, trapped between worlds. He described her as beautiful, with a sadness that was palpable. He said he had seen her, spoken to her, even held her hand. I found myself hanging on to his every word, the strange tale he spun tugging at my curiosity. When he finished his story, he turned his attention back to his drink, leaving me in a state of bewildered silence. I wanted to dismiss his tale as the ramblings of a drunk, but something held me back. A nagging sense of curiosity, maybe, or perhaps it was the sincerity in his voice. Either way, I found myself drawn into the mystery. Over the next few days, I found myself wandering the city streets at night, driven by an inexplicable urge to encounter this spectral lady. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every whisper of the wind sent a thrill of anticipation through me. I was a man possessed, my every thought consumed by the enigmatic figure. Then one night I saw her. She was standing at the end of a dimly lit alleyway, her figure illuminated by the soft glow of a street lamp. Her dress was old-fashioned, much like the man's in the bar, and she was beautiful, just as he had described. Her eyes met mine, and I felt a strange sense of recognition, a connection that transcended the boundaries of reality. I approached her slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. She didn't move, just kept staring at me with those sad eyes. I reached out to touch her, and my hand went through her spectral form. A rush of emotions washed over me. Sadness, despair, loneliness. I was experiencing her emotions, her trapped existence. That encounter changed me. I felt a deep connection with the ghost, a bond that I couldn't explain. I started visiting her every night, our silent exchanges more comforting than any words. I felt her pain, her longing, and I wanted to help her. Then one night she was gone. I walked the streets, searching desperately, but she was nowhere to be found. A sense of dread washed over me. Had something happened to her, or had she finally found her peace? Days turned into weeks, and there was no sign of her. I was back to my mundane existence, but everything seemed different. The city felt emptier, colder. I missed her, the spectral woman who had touched my life in ways I couldn't comprehend. Then one day, I saw the man from the bar. He was standing at the same spot where I had first seen the ghost. He looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. "She's gone, mate," he said, his voice filled with a strange sense of satisfaction. "She found her peace." His words left me with a sense of relief, but also an undeniable sense of loss. The spectral lady was gone, but she had left her mark. I was no longer the skeptic who had walked into the bar that fateful night. I had seen, felt, and experienced the supernatural, and it had changed me forever. The city sleeps around me now, the streets empty, but I no longer feel alone. I feel her presence, her peace. She is gone, but she remains a part of the city, a part of me. The spectral lady, the true, scary ghost case that shook my existence and made me believe. I hope you liked these ghost stories. If so, share your thoughts or spooky experiences below. Each like, share, and comment supports this channel. If you're new, subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss a video. For more scares, check out my archive. Thanks for watching, stay spooky, see you in the next video.